Oh. Sweet. Like this? That's fancy, guys.
Stand by, room, and shoot.
All right, carry on. Come on in. The mic is for the folks that are joining us on DCS Online. So for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Major General Deputy Lewis, the Chief of Staff here at U.S. Transportation Command. And it's absolutely my honor to be here to open up this program with these great Americans. You know, we're going to have a great program today. I want to thank all of you who have taken some time out today to come listen. I think this is going to be incredibly beneficial for all of us. I want to thank the folks who have joined remotely through DCS. Thank you for joining. Again, I think this is going to be a great program that's going to be mutually beneficial for all of us. I'm going to introduce in a minute Marcia Gonzalez. She's going to actually take it away from here. But, you know, I want to just share a quick thought that, first of all, we're very fortunate to have the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program coming to Scott. This is their very first trip here. And if you aren't aware, this particular event is one of a number of events happening all week long throughout not just Scott, but the St. Louis area. We're going to have some sports events tomorrow and Friday in the James Gym right down the street. So please get out and take a look at that. I'm sure that's going to be a blast. But you know, in my 29 years of service, I have to tell you, I have to make comment on how incredibly heartwarming it is to see an evolution of acknowledgement by the Department of Defense of the need for support and help and programs for our men and women who are going through, you know, not just the trauma of combat, but in some cases other kinds of trauma as well. When I was a young company grade officer coming onto active duty, there was none of this. And I know, Chief, you probably, those of you that, you know, Colonel Curlin, you've probably been around close to as long as I have and know what I'm talking about. There really are tremendous efforts in place to help men and women to either stay on active duty and continue to serve in spite of injuries and trauma, or to help transition out and then become, completely self-sufficient and functional and even competitive, right, in with follow-on programs. And so Marcia Gonzalez is going to talk about that. She's the Chief of Warrior Care for the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program and has taken her direction, in some cases directly from General Goldfein. So without further ado, Marcia, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Ma'am, thank you for the warm introduction and for having us here at Transcom. And like she said, I'm Marcia Gonzalez. I'm the Chief of Warrior Care Support Programs for the United States Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. We're aligned under the Air Force Personnel Center. But I can tell you that your Chief of Staff of the Air Force is very connected to what we do. He handpicked our current director, Colonel Mike Flatten, who's leading our program. And under his direction, we've made it a long way and where we're serving airmen today. So we just came from Warrior Games in Tampa, okay, where the Air Force competed against their sister services and 5 international teams. And ma'am, we love the Army, but the Air Force led the way, okay? All right, yeah. So I got to tell you, you have quite a competitor amongst you today. For the first time in 10 years, the Air Force team won the wheelchair basketball match. Kevin Green right here. Woohoo! He helped lead us there. We had wheelchair rugby this year for the first time. Imagine that. Air Force also won that match. Woohoo, go Air Force! And yeah, so then it came down to volleyball. And the Navy's won the last 2 years, and they already had these shirts made called three-peat. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So it's the best. There, I got a Navy person, so it's the best. Navy team, Navy pride. So it's the best out of 3. We went to the 3rd match. It was going point for point, and Navy team took it again for their three-peat, whatever. So hey, but we were very supportive of the Navy team. We also won the gold and silver and ultimate champion. But you know what? It's not about the medals, y'all. It's about the individual recovery of every airman, every service member stepping on that line, and their family there to support them. And at the end of the competition, it didn't matter what service you are, you're going to support one another. Now, there was some trash talking, no doubt. That's part of what we do, right? It's just part of what we do, but supporting one another. And that's what our program is all about. Our motto is to care beyond duty. So imagine that. Really think about that. I think we all know how to care beyond duty about the mission, right? We're all taught how to discipline. Lord, we know how to discipline, right? But has anybody ever taught us really what care is? What does that look like? What does that mean? Well, I can tell you we've been doing it for a while now. I've been with the program 8 years. We mandated a law in 2008 because, like the general and I were talking earlier, in the heat of the war, service members were coming home and they were transitioning them really fast and they were going back to their families and they weren't equipped to take care of them. And so some negative attention got us some positive results. So in law, every service was mandated to have a program to provide personalized services and support, personalized, not transactional, and not a checklist, to every service member who is wounded, ill, or injured. We're aligned under the Air Force Personnel Center. I don't want that to scare you. For those of you who are Air Force, we're not transactional, and we fight really hard to meet every airman exactly where they are and help them through their journey. But through doing this, we have seen the most resilient examples of a human being that you can think of. And during Warrior Games, General Goldfein, his heart is heavy. Chief Wright, their heart is heavy. We're at over 300% of the suicide rate that we were at last year for suicides, where we were. And he said, hey, I've tried everything. What do you think about people in your program going out and talk about it? I said, Chief, we've got you. We have 110 trained ambassadors, and I think we can meet the demand. We were heading right off into USAFE, so he sent a little note, and within 2 days, we ended up reaching 8,000 airmen. Now, we drove DTS crazy, you know what I'm saying? Because we didn't go according to the plan, but we followed the Chief's guidance. And I convinced Kevin to follow him with me to Aviano. In 2 days, we briefed 554 airmen, right? And we had lines of them afterwards asking for help, how they can learn about how to do this. And, hey, wait a minute, I think I'm struggling. And it was quite an honor to do that. So heading into Scott, we knew it was a perfect time to try to sync with this tactical pause. And the intent of this is let's get real and let's talk and connect with one another. So I have a personal connection to each one of these airmen and got to see them grow in their recovery journey. And I'm going to first start with Captain Retired Emily Elmore.
Hey, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? I'm not sure if this is on, but I can speak loudly if it's not, so no big deal there. I'm Captain Retired Emily Elmore. I am a C-130 pilot by trade. So here at Scott, they have AMC, of course, which is Air Mobility Command, and that is exactly where I fell under. So I did every kind of mission in the C-130 that AMC supports. I did air medical evacuation. I did troop drop. I did air land. I've landed on dry lake beds. I've landed up in Thule, which is the northernmost point that we have, right? I've done a little bit of all that we had at this command, and it was amazing. It was awesome. I loved it. I loved being a pilot. I worked very, very hard to be a pilot. So when I first came in, I had this idea of what it was going to be, and it was completely beyond what I expected it to be in terms of the mission set. There was always something new, and I had to constantly challenge myself. I was constantly in this period of growth, and I was meeting those metrics, and I was realizing that as I was confident, I was capable, and as I met those metrics, I felt unstoppable. Until I wasn't. See, here is where I experienced an injury, and it should have been a routine injury, right? Lots of our airmen, lots of our soldiers, our sailors and Marines, they experience what they think is going to be routine, and then they'll get back into the fight. For me, I had a tear in my labrum, which is back here, and my biceps tendon. Now, these two tendons are what keep your shoulder in your body. When those aren't there, pops out of your body and it won't go back in. Now that's pretty common until you tighten that up. In my case, a routine injury became not routine when I realized that a bone was missing out of my shoulder. So your shoulder looks like a socket, right, ball and socket joint. I was missing the whole top piece. So my shoulder was more like this, which meant that no matter what they did, there was no way they could reconnect that soft tissue back to the bone. And as it turns out, the Air Force really likes their pilots to keep their arms attached to them, not to the airplane when they're pulling that yoke back. And so they told me, hey, you got to get this surgery, you got to figure out something to do. Well, I went to some of the best doctors in the country, and the best that they could come up with was to open up my hips and to get bone from my hips and to reconstruct some semblance of a normal looking shoulder, which was very much not normal for my body because it actually turns out it's in my other shoulder as well. And so that was what they were going to do, but they also caveated that I was not going to be able to fly. If they did this, it would be too delicate. So I did what any good pilot would do, and what do you think I said? No way am I doing that surgery. Do the bare minimum that you can absolutely do. I want to get back in the air. And I feel like most of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen would do the same thing, right? We really value our identity as it aligns with the mission because we bust our butts to get that AFSC in our case, or that code that tells us, what we do is who we are. This is where we align. This is our team. This is who we belong to, and they belong to us. And we're not ready to give that up. And I wasn't ready to give it up either. So I said, what else can we do? I said, we'll try to Frankenstein some of these soft tissues together, see if it holds, and if it does, maybe you'll fly, maybe you won't. Well, sure enough, I got back in the air. 6 months later, I was deployed down to Bagram. So I felt that it was a success. Deployment was painful, but we made it work. So came back from that deployment, upgraded, and then I was sent down to NAS Pensacola to be an instructor. This was my great, glorious joint spouse gig because my husband is an active duty B-52 weapons systems officer. So we went down there, not just to align with our jobs, but also to grow our family because we'd been geographically separated for 5 years at this point, which is pretty rough on a marriage, right? But again, like my family, the Air Force family, had supplemented that relationship for a long time, but now it's time to work on me a little bit. I thought I was doing the right thing, right? Working on me. So we go grow our family. But we still want to focus on the mission, right? There's lots that we can do. That's the one place that we grow our weapons systems officers, combat systems officers, our navigators, electronic warfare officers. That's the one place that we produce those folks there. So we went there, we grew our family. I gave birth to our first son, and then within a few months, my arm started to dislocate again. I was actually feeding our child, dislocated, popped out, held the baby, finished feeding the child, put the child down, told my husband, hey, I think it popped out again. He's like, yeah, okay, right, like, all right. Gave him the x-ray after I got back from the hospital. I was sitting like a ice cream cone had been right out, like it was sitting out like that. And so, like, all right, what do we do now, right? And the command was very, very supportive. They're like, hey, let us know, whatever surgery you need, we're here. We'll give you the time. Not a big deal. Finish up your, maternity leave, which will probably coincide with your recovery, right? No problem. We'll continue to have you sim and do academics, so that way I'm still facilitating the timeline, right? Command's doing right by the mission, doing right by me. I feel good. I'm still doing right by the mission, doing right by me. And so I go to get this other kind of, makeshift surgery where they go in and they put in a joint replacement. Now remember, I don't have all of the bone that I'm supposed to have. So they can only give me a part of a replacement because they can't put the other piece in. And they decide that the best way to keep it from dislocating is to do what they call overstuffing, which sounds about as pleasant as you might imagine. They take a big guy's joint and they put it in my little girl body, and they say that the surface area is going to prevent it from popping out because it'll just continue to roll on what bone I have. But that means they're going to have to stretch what remaining soft tissue I have over this big thing, right? Not only that, so degraded is my soft tissue at this point that they have to put in a bunch of cadaver tissue to give me spacing, so that way it rolls against something other than just hard bone. So they do this, and my body rejects the cadaver tissue and is having a hard time accepting the difference in the spacing and the new shape that they've given my shoulder. So now all of a sudden I start to have a neurological response to it. Starts slowly at first, just some little twitches, right? And it's like, hey, I'm having some twitching. And they're like, well, it's post-surgery, it's some swelling just kind of up there and that. There's lots of nerves up there, not a big deal. I'm like, all right, I'm having a lot of numbness right through here. And they're like, well, that's where the incision is. Again, not a big deal. I'm like, all right, I mean, what about like some of these tingling? It's going to sleep at night. I'm showing that there's progressing symptoms. They say, nope, like you're still on track, keep going. But I'm noticing that I'm starting to get muscle weakness and some of these other things. And as it turns out, I was having an autoimmune response to all of the nerves inside of my brachial plexus, which are responsible for movements all the way up into your neck and down into your fingertips. So pretty quickly it starts to progress. I get to the point that my hand's so weak I can barely move it up just a few inches off of my body. it becomes very clear that this, again, is not a routine recovery. And at this point, my command says to me, hey, still okay with us? Just let us know what you need. Emily, you let us know what you need, and we'll make it happen. But here's the thing, unless you've gone through a major injury or illness, you don't necessarily know what you need. And as commanders, supervisors, unless you've gone through a major injury or illness, or you have somebody in your command that's gone through it before, or maybe a family member, there's going to be some blind spots for you as well, because you won't know. And if that injury or illness is radically different from what you've experienced before, then that also applies. And so all of a sudden now you're trying to still do right by the mission, but still do right by your member. And that becomes very hard to do that balancing act, right? And that's where the value of what we're saying now meets up against the practicality of the constraints that we have in this resource-limited environment. And that becomes very hard to balance as leaders and supervisors. That's just a reality that we have to face. And what happens is that when we start talking about resiliency and we're trying to meet those metrics, we end up sounding a little bit disingenuous. That's something here my colleague talks about, is, and he'll say it much better than I can, is that you'll get to a point where it's like, hey, tell us what you need, and then on your way out the door, there's a but. And it's not meant to be, hey, it's not that I don't care, it's just that if you have this capability, I also need this. But instead, maybe what we hear, because we're dealing with all of this other stuff, right, is, oh, I don't actually have the ability to do this. I don't have the capability or the time, or we don't have the resources, and I am definitely not going to let my people, my family, my friends hold the bag because I need to take a knee. And so that's where this program just really shines. It's really, really exceptional because as commanders, this program alleviates that burden because one, they have all of the resources, they have an entire plethora of different types of injuries, illnesses, everything from combat to cancer. So if you've lost a limb, or if you're dealing with a progressing injury, or if you've got TBI, military sexual trauma, any of these types of things that are very complex, they have the resources to get those to the member and to alleviate the burden of trying to find the right resource on the commander so they can focus on the mission while their person focuses on their recovery. So you're still doing right by the mission, you're doing right by the member, and that's the balance that we're trying to strike, and that's really where Air Force Wounded Warrior shines. And so for me, what I didn't anticipate was that along with the physical stuff, once everyone's expecting you to get better, and then time goes on, and then time goes on, and they're asking you, and then time goes on, and you're still not getting better, a couple things happen. One, you just start either telling them yes or, yeah, day by day, working inch by inch, but you're starting to get worn down by that. You don't want to tell everybody all the different types of treatments that you're going through, that you're trying to get back as hard as you can. Meanwhile, the people that are still having to pick up where you lack, even those able to do sims and do academics, couldn't fly. I'm in a flying billet. Very few actual active duty flyers that are in that job in AS Pensacola, they're now having to pick up my slack. So there's resentment that starts to grow there. There's resentment that is returned on your part because they get to do what you can't do, and you're a little upset that maybe somebody doesn't see what you're going through, or isn't willing to ask the right questions, or that they're putting the burden on you to tell them what you need, and you have no idea because you're playing catch up. Whereas again, Air Force Wounded Warrior, they not only have these resources, but they have a whole team of peers that have gone through something that can act as mentors and can kind of help you to anticipate some of those things that you may not realize are going to happen until after you're well down the rabbit hole and trying to figure out how to climb back out of it. So along with that, you think of not just the physical piece of an injury, but also the mental piece, the emotional piece, the relationship piece. Remember, my husband, active duty guy as well, right, also a flyer, he's got a job to do. He's got to do full-time flying. Oh, by the way, he's a new full-time parent. Oh, by the way, he's also my caregiver because at this point, I couldn't take out the trash. So this incredibly capable, confident person who once led, an 8-shift formation down into a canyon, now all of a sudden can't lift a teacup into the cabinet, right? I had an incredible crisis of confidence, and so now he's having to try to deal with that also. There's not just this physical, emotional mental, relational piece on my part, there is on your entire support network. For me, I was incredibly lucky. I had an incredibly supportive husband, supportive family members. His family dropped everything, so my family dropped everything and came to help us take care of our son and to help me recover. We had command that came out. We had people that were doing meal trains for us. Some of our young airmen, they don't have that same kind of family support. Some of our older airmen, you don't know what people's family dynamics is. They may have children. They may not be able to get the kind of care that they wish they could while they're dealing with this injury or illness. There's all of these complex pieces, and it's very difficult to know what kind of pain is manifesting inside of somebody as they're going through their recovery process. And so that is also when we start talking about this tactical pause, where it becomes crucially important as that time goes on to think about the person as a whole and not just their role within our unit. It's very easy to get, focused and short-sighted when it comes to that, because we're trying to balance, the needs of the mission. But if we lose that person entirely, right? Think about how much we spend on a CISO, on a pilot, on any other operator, on our maintainers, really anybody. It's all resource constrained, right? You think about how much money we spend on them. Think about how much more money we spend if we lose them. Think about how devastating it is if we lose them to suicide, where now all of a sudden that has this domino effect on everybody else in their workstation, where everybody's needing to take that knee, and now maybe somebody who was kind of on the fence, who we're also not talking to, is maybe 1 inch closer to a decision they can't take back. And so here again, Air Force Wounded Warrior is why, as a commander, it needs to be in your arsenal. You don't have to worry about enrolling them. You just need to think about referring them. If somebody looks like they're having a tough time and you're not sure what kind of resource they need, as long as you're engaging with them and showing them that you care, or you're letting them know, hey, I think you may qualify for this program. I don't know if they'll enroll you, but they're gonna get you a resource either way. Maybe a resource that I can't see, but that is going to help you be a better airman, because the whole point of this program is to get you fit to fight faster. One of my peers also said this, and I like to tell everybody the same quote because I think that it's critically important that everybody here, especially for everyone that's joining us. Marcus Aurelius said, like a soldier storming the wall, you have a job to do. If you need help to get over it, so what? And I think that's true, both mentally and emotionally and physically, spiritually. If you have a job to do and you want to get that job done, then you got to do it. It doesn't mean you have to hold it in. That doesn't mean you have to pretend that you're performing here if you're here. Sometimes it simply means, brother, I need an arm, pull me up. And just by doing that, then you can then get over that wall. And if that wall is one that's in your mind or it's one that's in combat, it makes us all warriors. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Emily. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your journey with us. Next, I'd like to introduce Master Sergeant Retired Adam Butler.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. By a show of hands, how many individuals here with me today in this room know someone personally who has committed suicide? And so sadly for me, I see just about every hand in this room go up. And if you think for a moment about where you were when you maybe received the call, or if you were the person who went to check on a coworker who did not report to work on time come Monday morning, and you went to a house or apartment, we're all forever changed by that call, by opening that apartment door, by that hysterical notification by a loved one, a family member. It's a life that's shattered forever, permanently. It's a work center that's destroyed. And for 15 years of my 20 years on active duty, I tried my best to piece back together the lives of all of those that we have lost to suicide without really much luck. What I found over all of the years that I spent as an Air Force OSI special agent is a common theme that connected those cases together. And it's one that I found after I started my road to recovery that I identified with in my own life. And that was individuals were hesitant to come forward because we didn't want to lose our clearance, or there was a fear of losing a clearance. And if we didn't have our clearance, well, there's a risk of losing our job. And in my case, as a special agent with OSI, one pretty much meant the three went. If I did not have a clearance, well, I could not arm and my job was gone. If I didn't have a job, well, the other two, it was a moot point. And so I fit into this program on two fronts, on the physical aspect and the invisible aspect. And for a few moments, I want to share my story with you, but not because it's my story, but because I believe there's components of what I've gone through that I know will resonate with members of our military, civilian military, our military family. And then talk to you about how and where I went when I went down that dark path and what that looked like, and how I was able to recover out of that dark time. So for me, the physical injury piece, I have physical injuries that I incurred when I was deployed. I have a TBI, and I have permanent neurological complications because of that TBI that have had an impact on my life ever since that incident occurred. One that I was hesitant to come forward and talk about because I did not want to lose my clearance, my job, my ability to arm. But I tell you, that is not what sent me down my path of destruction, what nearly cost me everything. It was the agony that I spent years beating myself up over on the invisible wound side. I'm blessed to have a family. I'm blessed to have a daughter who's 6 and a son who's 4. And it's a blessing because my wife and I were not guaranteed a family. We worked very, very hard, and we prayed for a long time for a family. We had 6 miscarriages before we could have a family. And one day at an assignment in Colorado Springs, I received a phone call from a detective that I had been working with during my time there. And he had told me an active duty military member had beat his son into a coma. That news was particularly difficult for me to receive because it came 10 days after our 3rd miscarriage. And so I was upset. I was hurt. I was struggling to understand why that had to happen, why I was the one that had to take the call, you know. But the details got worse. The little boy was not just a little boy. He was 7 weeks old. He was an infant. He was an infant. Enzo was his name. Enzo was crying, and Dad had shift work. And Dad was frustrated that Enzo was crying. And so Dad made a bottle, as the story goes, and parents, and even those of us that are not parents, know that infants, certainly 7-week-old infants, are not able to hold their heads up. And so Dad said Enzo headbutted him in the nose, and Dad then started to beat Enzo on the back of the head until Enzo vomited his formula and went limp. Enzo was beat into a coma. Mom came back in from out of town and had to pull her baby off of life support. And the following day, if that wasn't horrific enough, I had to watch the autopsy of this little boy. The autopsies are something that we deal with in my line of work. I had been to plenty of autopsies in the past. Colorado Springs, any autopsy, any medical examiner's office, Typically, all of the tables are full. They're busy. It's just the way life works. But this particular day was different. When I walked in, it was just Enzo, nobody else. It was the chief medical examiner and his deputy, and nobody else. And for 6 hours, I had to watch these doctors fillet this little boy on the autopsy table. And it got so bad that even the medical examiner and his deputy had to take a break. And these are professionals that have been doing this their whole life, and they had to stop and leave and come back. I had to stop and leave and come back. That affected me. It wasn't what I had when I was deployed. That affected me. I couldn't go home and talk to my wife about that. And I was in an office with folks that were newly assigned, and I had been in our organization for a number of years. And in that particular case, it was very evil, very horrific, and they were looking to me for how do we respond as a team. There was no time for me to process what I had gone through, and I suppressed that. In another case, a father was carrying his child up to bed, and the little guy had ADHD, was very hyper, and didn't want to go to bed one night. And so this little guy, as the story went in the interview, smacked his dad in the face, and dad crushed his son's throat and put him face first down in the pillow, watched his little boy urinate and defecate on himself, and went back downstairs and finished watching the movie. And mom found her boy dead the next morning. I tried to get fingerprints off this little guy's neck, and I just wanted to be a dad. I had worked hard my entire military career. I had not been in trouble. I was a fast burner, twice nominated for the 12 Outstanding Airmen of the Year. I love being an Air Force Airman. But people around me started to change. I couldn't relate to folks anymore. Arguments were too exhausting to have on a regular basis, so not having arguments at all seemed like the right thing to do. I now know that's termed isolation. I stopped doing the things that I enjoyed doing that were positive: outdoor activities, gym, woodworking, motorsports, ATVs, things like that. My diet fell. I got heavy, overweight, and alcohol became something that I leaned on. And I dragged my family, my unit that I care deeply about, and my command through an embarrassing, humiliating alcohol-related incident. And at my lowest low, I was 250-ish pounds in a mess. And at the time, I did not realize I was enrolled into a program that turned my life around and was there for my family and helped my wife and I get back on track together and start rebuilding what I had slowly been tearing down. While I was at my initial early treatment phase, a team of Air Force Wounded Warrior professionals were crafting a specific plan to meet my needs where I was at, and I did not know that. And when I returned back to my base, that became the roadmap for what I like to call my ability to recover with dignity. And that's something that Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Wright recently posted in a leadership forum or a leadership post out on social media. And in part, it discussed the ability to recover with dignity. And that's what Air Force Wounded Warrior did for me. But it wasn't just about me and what I did to myself and the slow destruction that I put myself through. My wife did not ask for any of that. My unit did not ask for any of that. And the Air Force Wounded Warrior program was there for my wife. And in turn, by allowing me that opportunity to get my health back together, to empower me through resiliency and through other programs that are specific to what these professionals do on a daily basis and do best, I'm back down, I like to think in the best shape that I've ever been in my life. But more importantly, my wife and I have my marriage back. I'm retired. I'm moving on with employment, continued service with our United States government. And if I had any message for anybody here in this room or those that might be listening to this particular program or briefing, I would say that I was in part responsible for my own route down that dark path, because I did not come out forward soon enough and say I needed help. It's not normal to go through and see those things. My battlefield was injuries while I was deployed and was going through and seeing some of those horrific things, but that was mine. You don't have to go through those things to have significant things going on in your life. Your battlefield could be a horrific car accident. That can be traumatizing. Your battlefield can be somebody that broke into your home while you were there sleeping, and that causes PTSD. Or it could be verbal or domestic violence within the privacy of the four walls of your home, and you've been suffering that. Or sadly, military sexual trauma that occurred at some point during your military career that has never been processed or addressed. That could be your battlefield. And I would encourage folks that are still suffering in silence to step forward and ask for help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. So thank you.
So I can tell you all that I know hearing Adam's story is probably connected or touched your heart in some way, right? And I don't know how to say it in my words, but to have the honor to be through by so many airmen's side and show them the joy of discovery of what they can do and what they can get through, and how we do that, not for just them, but also for their families. And really, it's just about showing one another that we care. We have an airman here at this event. His name's Christian Vega. He suffered a brain aneurysm last year, and he came to our first care event in Offutt Air Force Base last year at this time. And Christian Vega came with his mother, and he was still early in his recovery, but we got him there. He didn't get to do a lot. He went on to the retirement list. He's permanently retired. And he seriously emails us on our social media sites 3 to 5 times a week trying to get back to an event. So we said, hey, he's in Chicago. We can have him come to Scott Air Force Base. He could not wait to come and tell us and show us how far he's come in his recovery. And so when he saw me out, I said, Christian, what was it that you just had to come back? And he said, it's the way you made me feel. And sometimes you can't always win or do everything for whoever you supervise or your leaders, but you can show one another you care, and you can just be there, right? So I really thank you all for sharing your stories today. At this time, we'd like to open it up for any questions. If anybody here has some questions for one of our ambassadors or for the program. Yes, sir.
How's your shoulder?
How's my shoulder?
Yeah, how are you doing now?
Oh, so it's, well, I'll show you. So it was almost completely, I'm very excited about it. I've actually made quite a few improvements. So I can go up to about here comfortably. At this point, it starts to get incredibly painful. Forcibly, I can go up to about 90 now. So we're getting there. So my axillary nerve and my subscapularis nerve, again, these two nerves that are right through here, still very, very intermittent. So sometimes it'll just still kind of slam down, by my side. But it's better than it was, right? So at this point, I can change a diaper, which is exciting. I've got, my son now is 3 years old. Yeah, right? I mean, exciting. These are the things you get excited about, right? It's like, no, it still hurts, honey. You got to change this one too. I'm so sorry, he's so heavy. I can't pick him up. But like now, so this was a really big deal for me. Is that now that I have he's 3, and now that I have enough strength in the arm, I can pick him up because he can grab onto my neck this way, and then I can support him. Guys, I couldn't hold my baby, right? I couldn't hold my child. So that kind of stuff, like that's a really big deal, and that kind of emotional burden is painful. So just bringing it back to the program, because the program's really awesome, and it helps with this kind of piece of it, because you just don't expect that to happen, or that a recovery can take so long, right? So we are seeing some improvement though, which small steps, baby steps, but that's what it takes, right? One step at a time.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about your kids.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you, guys. So my daughter, beautiful, so blessed. When she's 6, Harper Bug, Pumpkin, love Bugaroo. 6, first grade, is doing wonderful. Blake is 4, and Blake blessed us at birth with a surprise diagnosis of Down syndrome, and is the absolute best diagnosis, the best that could happen to our family. Our little girl has a doll that she wants. It was an ultra rare, limited edition doll. And as she learned about Blake and what Down syndrome is and meant, she got so excited one day and came in running like she just discovered some new rare periodic, something new, and said, "Mommy, Daddy, Blake is my ultra rare limited edition brother. There's no other one like him in the world." And we were just like, wow, a 6-year-old that can, so it's amazing. They're 2 peas in a pod. He loves her so much. She loves him. And Blake, every day for Blake is just a joy. It's new, it's exciting, it's fun. And he is, all he knows and does is love. And he can bring smiles to a room full of folks who are just having bad days in a heartbeat. So absolute blessings, and I'm so grateful for that, for the grace that I was given in that chance to recover with dignity and be a dad again. That's what this program, to be a dad and a husband, is what this program has given to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I'll tell you, the first time they came to an event was November of last year. I always do a caregiver talk, and I got to his wife. She couldn't say anything, but she didn't have to. We knew exactly what she was dealing with, because we get a little synopsis. We know the service members our team is dealing with, and so we immediately lined up what they needed, and they took full advantage of it. I can tell you that very quickly he went on the competitive track, and at Air Force Trials he made the non-select, but he won the Spirit of the Team award. And we brought him with us. We brought him with us to training, and we brought him with us to the games. And I feel certain next year you're going to see him on the team as a competitor if he continues down this track. So I want y'all to keep connected to us and watch how far Adam takes this next step in his journey to recovery.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So how many airmen have you all been able to help over the years that the program's been around? I think you told me it was around since 2010, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. So informally, we started in 28, and we started building, and formally we became an actual Warrior Care Division in 2012. And so since inception, we've enrolled about 10,000 airmen, and we're actively case managing about 4,000, and then 6,000 are in our Airmen for Life program. And one of the things General Goldfein did when he took his seat, he was the vice seat, right? And he told us a whole lot. But even when he got his chief of staff job, he made a quick visit to AFPC, and he asked to see a couple people, and I was one of them. And I was very thankful to be here, but here's what he said. He's like, "Hey, Marcia, you know how the Marine Corps, they have that Marine for Life program? And they're like, once a Marine, always a Marine?" And I'm like, "Yes, they're real serious about it." He's like, he said, I want us to have an Airmen for Life program, but really specifically for this group of airmen, because I don't want them to feel like they've been thrown away and that we don't care about them. So through our Airmen for Life program, we try to keep connecting with our veterans, because I can tell you that, is recovery really ever over? Right? There are people who draw a dotted line this way, and I draw it back the other way. Because every day is a new journey. Our goal is to keep moving this way, but let's face it, we all continue to experience challenges, maybe new ones, or ones from the original thing that we went through. So connected to those airmen, and how we provide service does change, and it's based on kind of where you are in that continuum of care. Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen anything significantly different or unique about your single service members?
So, yes, absolutely. They don't usually have the same, support system that our airmen with families do. Who's noticing what's going on at home? Like, let's make PTSD, TBI, usually it manifests itself at home first. So if that's not happening, the work center, right? What I challenge you to do, if something's going on with your service member, don't automatically assume it's something bad that they've done. Ask them what's going on in their life. Because usually it's because of something. You know, none of us wake up every day trying to be a bad person or a bad service member. So I would say for our single airmen, and then who they go home and talk about it. So we have a lot that we've adopted, and we help them through a whole lot of things, right? And they go through challenges, right, Kevin?
Hell yeah.
But through those challenges, I can tell you what you're going through, who's there for you. AFW2, I'm telling you, I keep connected to this young man. I'm proud of him, I'm proud of how far he's come in his recovery. I got a phone call from, I knew the phone number to General Goldfein's office, right? I know that number in my head. And so my cell phone was ringing. And they said, hey, we've got this airman, and we want him to get him connected to your program. And his name's Kevin Green. Okay, yeah, sure, I'll reach out to him. And so our first contact was, he wanted to be the towel boy for Invictus. And I was like, hey, yeah, that's not how that starts. And so, you know, he's been on quite a journey with us. And we really, for those who we know don't have that support system, we're gonna take an extra step, try to surround them. We've got coaches, we have the most phenomenal coaches. We get to by name contract them. Yes, we have a special memo authority designated to be able to do that, but it's the right people to do the right job, right? And they surround our service members as they're trying to make it through this journey. We've got resiliency program managers. We just have a whole host of resources, but how we've been able to do that is great support from our leadership team to ensure we have the right people doing these jobs. Because you really have to think about, if we're caring for our most seriously injured and ill airmen, you need to have the right people who can really put others before yourself every day. But know how to compartmentalize that too, right? Because it can be quite a journey. We wake up to the counseling morning report every day. And we're gonna enroll those who are SI or BSI off of that counseling morning report. We also work with our medical community, with commanders, anybody can refer to our program. If you go to our Air Force Wounded Warrior website, which is easy to find from your government computer, right, ma'am, but not so easy from your personal, as she told me today, refer an airman if you think, or if it's another service member, you can reach out to us. We are very closely connected to our other service programs, our Wounded Warrior programs, okay? But let us do that work for you. And if we don't enroll them, we're still gonna do an assist to make sure we get them connected to a resource that they need. Yes, sir.
Marcia, oftentimes military members on active duty become ill or injured, and they get involved in the medical or physical evaluation process, and it causes a great deal of stress.
Yes.
Is there linkage between those processes in your office?
Yes, absolutely. Let me tell you how we're aligned. So when I told you we were an AFPC, but we're not rolled into that transactional tiered support. It's the Airmen and Family Care Directorate. There's 5 divisions. The Disability Evaluation Division that runs that process is our brother. I call it our brother division because the guy who runs it. So we sit side by side with them, and we work hand in hand to help our airmen through that process. Yes, sir.
So how much traveling do you do like this?
Oh, wow. So it's been an exciting year. We've done 6 regional care events this fiscal year. This is our last event. We've also done Warrior Games. So I think I've traveled about 120 days this year. Next year, we also integrate Invictus Games. How many have heard of those? Oh, that's so exciting. So I'll tell you something. I've been the U.S. team manager for the last 5 years. And I'll get to do it again this year. And so we travel doing that. And that's on the international level. And really trying to help our international partners because they have service members who've suffered just the same. And so we really try to use those to have symposiums. So there's games and competitions, right? But in the background, there's all this collaboration about how we care for one another. Our challenge, you know, is that outreach and awareness. And this year we've really focused hard on that. We reached 8,000 airmen in person when we were
right, well, listen, again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. This is a great program, and I want to ask you guys to give another round of applause to these folks. I mean, I know it takes a lot just to get up in front of people and talk. I do it all the time, and it's not even talking about what you guys are talking about. That's super special. It takes a lot of courage, and really appreciate you opening up and sharing. Because like I said, I was absolutely confident this was going to be incredibly valuable, and I know it was for me. I hope it was for you guys too. So with that, Bill, do we have anything we need to say? What's that? Yeah, this guy. All right. Well, thank you all very much, and again, thank you guys for joining us online, okay? Cool.